Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is the Root Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
Good evening, everybody. This is Rudy Reyes right here on the Root Dog Show. It has been a minute here, but when you work in news like I do, sometimes you just need to take a break. Well, we're not talking about news today other than the news you should already be aware of, and that's the New York Giants at 2-5, traveling to Acrisure Stadium on the road in Pittsburgh to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who find themselves at a 5-2 mark. And maybe a little bit has to do with, Russell Wilson. Maybe not. We're going to talk about that and more here on the RootDogShow.com. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And this is going to be a longer segment than, maybe not quite an hour when I anchor, and longer than if I was running a segment on KMPH Fox 26. But I wanted to thank you all for joining me tonight. The New York Giants seem to find themselves in a very deep hole, and maybe offensive line play and or quarterback play, maybe a combination of those two, find themselves in a situation where they're just now starting to figure out the nuances of what it takes to run an offense. Now, in all fairness to Mike Daboll, I don't believe that Daniel Jones is the answer. I think anybody who's watching this knows that. I think more importantly, when you look at where these two teams are, you couldn't be any more different. But of course, that should not mean that the Steelers need to take this lightly. They need to take this one play at a time, one snap at a time, and one movement of the football at a time. Now, the Steelers, again, as I stated, 5-2 in total record and number one in the AFC North, at least for right now. Baltimore Ravens fall to 5-3. And I think more importantly, when you look at where the Giants are offensively, it's sad to know that not only are the Giants having a miserable season, but the Jets, who the Steelers played last week, were down immensely at a 40-plus disadvantage to the Steelers when they only were able to score 2 touchdowns. So a lot of issues with New York teams right now, and the Giants obviously is that team, and that's what we're going to highlight here today. We're not going to talk about the Jets. Yeah, it's great to know that we beat the Jets and the Devontae Adams. I wanted to say this for the record, for those that are watching, and maybe those that aren't watching, that should be watching. You can follow me on social media at Rudy Reyes, Rudy R. Reyes on Instagram. Find me on LinkedIn. Go to the RootDogShow.com. Join me on my journey as I find my way through this broadcast media landscape and eventually find myself in my end goal as an NFL sideline reporter / voice for one of 32 teams in the NFL. So follow along, enjoy the journey. There's always stumbles along the way, but that is life. That's just the way it is. So let's talk about the Giants here. Giants offense, again, trying to figure things out. And to be honest with you, they don't look very good. Now, there are some problems that they could give the Steelers in the sense of Joey Porter Jr. couldn't handle CeeDee Lamb. He struggled against Michael Pittman Jr. It's just a lot of. Could this be a game to lose? Yeah, maybe, but you don't need to lose against a team who's 2-5. Now, Steelers have done this before in past instances, but I think more importantly, the Steelers themselves find individual glory as well as collective glory in wins, not only at home but on the road. Doesn't matter, a win is a win in your division, not in your division. Of course, that could get down to the wire when we're talking about, enter AFC North play, which the Steelers will have after the bye week, which is next Sunday. They'll take on the AFC North in no specific order, because when it's AFC North football, it's just a little bit different. It hits you a little bit different, harder, continuously, and you find yourself wondering, can the Steelers even do this against the AFC North? Well, the answer to that is yes. But more importantly, the Giants, out of all teams in the NFC East, find themselves at 2-5, dead last in the respective position. Yeah, you can probably say they end up last in many statistical categories. And of course, we don't, at least on paper, believe that the Giants could be better than they actually are. But you know what? Frankly, they're not. And I know a lot of Giants fans thinking, boo, boo, boo. How can this be possible? Well, it's possible because it starts with Daniel Jones and the lack of quarterback play, the lack of situational football awareness, when to throw the ball. Is it a check down? Is it a throw out? Is it a time to just call on the towel? We've seen Anthony Richardson, who plays for the Indianapolis Colts, as we just mentioned, in a situation where he tapped out during the game. Of course, Get Up certainly had their segment and their laughter about it. This is kind of not a laughing matter. I think Daniel Jones may end up tapping out after this one is all said and done. But game, it still hasn't been played. It's 4 o'clock Pacific time, and there's still plenty of time to go to determine whether or not the Giants can get this done on the road. I don't think they can. They may make this a very close game, I think, than most people expect, only because there are times and flashes of brilliance from the defense for the Giants up front, not so much in the secondary. Speaking of secondary, the Steelers, at least up front we're going to talk about secondary in a minute, but I wanted to talk about up front for the Giants. They have basically have allowed many touchdowns and find themselves in the middle of the pack in regards to total defense. Steelers are 11 in total defense and have only allowed 28 points, making this a very bad one on paper, at least for the New York Football Giants. Now, over the past 2 weeks, they just scored a combined 10 points, and the Steelers continue running up the score as they did with Russell Wilson against the other New York team, as we just mentioned last week. Russell Wilson looked good, and my synopsis of him is game by game, snap by snap. If he doesn't follow through and this game gets out of control quickly, you're going to see Justin Fields take over under center. That, at least in my perspective, could very well happen as this game goes on. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of things that you look at for the Steelers that may not be as shiny, as not so clear, and maybe needs a little bit of polishing in order to see that reflective look. And I think that Patrick Queen has not quite lived up to the expectation, and ultimately has just played some very poor football when he's trying to be this, major pass rushing kind of guy, and that's basically not his style. He's forced to play with awareness, and clearly there hasn't been a whole lot of that. Lost in certain plays, not finding himself in a situation where he can be that difference maker, at least up front, or follow a would-be running back and finds himself lost in the shuffle defensively. Why that is, only Patrick Queen knows, and hopefully that doesn't become a liability up front for the Steelers. As you know, they love to rotate in linebackers. And when I say linebackers, I mean even TJ Watt gets a playoff. Cameron Hayward gets a playoff. But there's been some very good looks right now. Peyton Wilson looking pretty good. And he can go in and just thump you and hammer you. He's done it this season. I want to see what that looks like moving forward. Benton just has this raw man-moving capability, just getting people out of the way, and could ultimately be the pass rusher that Daniel Jones doesn't see on the blind side, depending on where the Steelers present him on the line. Now, the Steelers secondary, a little bit injury prone, but I think overall this is really about depth, and that's why they went and reacquired Edmonds, who was originally drafted in 2014 by the Steelers. He ended up being a free agent and cut, so the Steelers went ahead and acquired him because he's familiar with the defense. Whether or not he plays a role in it is beyond me, but I've seen him on special teams, and he knows how to hit you. So if they want to go that direction, I think they could. Joey Porter Jr. has been decent against other receivers, as I just mentioned, not very good against CeeDee Lamb and not very good against Michael Pittman Jr. So a lot of things to look for in that matchup tonight. However, when you look at Jackson and the athleticism that he has, certainly you have to look at this and say, well, is he going to be the difference maker? Is he going to be that guy? Well, he could, but it depends on what his health status is and if he's healthy enough to perform at the level that he needs to. Yes, it's his first year in Pittsburgh, but is he familiar with the coverage? Yes. Why? Because he was with the Panthers that ran a very similar defensive set where it made him very effective very quickly when you just kind of a plug and play that kind of guy on the field. With that being said, you look at Beanie Bishop, who had an absolutely stellar game, 2 picks against the Jets last week. And when you look at Deshaun Elliott, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's still one of the best safeties in the National Football League, had a chance to meet Minka, interview him. Great guy, great athleticism, great awareness, and it's going to be a tough matchup for anybody who goes up against Minka. And sadly enough, I don't know that the Giants have enough between the pass rush up front by Benton, the looks by TJ Watt, the pressure by Cameron Hayward, that you're going to see a whole lot of Daniel Jones standing up, because more than likely he will be on his backside. At least one sack for TJ Watt, if not more. Cameron Hayward could get a pressure or two that leads to a sack, maybe a tackle for loss, a punch out, somewhere in that genre. But then nobody is better in the NFL, maybe in the AFC North to be more specific, to use cover 3 than the Steelers are. Why? Because they become like a too high league, right? Too high safeties in the back. And that's kind of where they live. That's their bread and butter, and a very safety look from them, or safe look from them, actually. And so when it comes to pre-snap or even a post-snap, they're very good on it. And of course, like I said, almost half of their snaps are in cover 3. So make no mistake, you're going to see this early and often. If that happens, you're going to see Elliott and or Queen rush in, depending on Queen's ability to fight through would-be blockers to get to the quarterback and or disrupt the play as the ball is snapped. So we'll see. Well, that's certainly another matchup to look at as well. Now, with that being said, they have a very zone heaviness to them. If they're matched up with Porter on the outside, they could have, some pretty good success with covering wide receivers. But the pressure's there up front. That puts Daniel Jones in a very poor situation where he's not going to be allowed to throw that ball downfield. Now, the Raiders managed to get Brock Bowers involved against Porter in a multiple, like maybe 2 blocking tight ends and leaving Brock Bowers, a guy who's open. If the Giants can do something in a very short passing situation against Porter, like maybe Theo Johnson, perhaps, then you get to, ball out. And maybe if he becomes a blocker as well. So there, again, something to look at for in that matchup tonight. And it's a very tough place to play anyway in Pittsburgh against the Steelers, who have one of those rabid fan bases in the National Football League. But with that being said, this could be a game where you look at the Steelers, think to yourself, well, they're 5-2. They look great with Russell Wilson. They look good with Justin Fields, who kind of helped lead them this direction. I give proper credit and due to a guy by the name of Justin Fields, because he's kept them in games many, many times. And to be honest with you, so has the defense in a variety of ways. And those are those 2 picks from Deshaun Elliott, as I mentioned, Beanie Bishop, as I stated earlier in the show. Now, with that being said, the Steelers have been exceptional in getting those pressures, closing those boxes, not allowing quarterbacks to run. But Daniel Jones is relatively fleet of foot. So if they can design plays where he can run and scamper for first downs, that's something to look out for as well at the line. However, the Steelers will need to do much more to help put that contain in, and that's with corner blitzes coming early and often. Now, the good thing is that when Porter is in the box, he has a way to basically disrupt offenders, wide receivers. And of course, with quick passing, he has a way to really knock those down, get his hands inside of the bread box and prevent pass interference. But then again, on the opposite side of that spectrum, you're either playing on the ball or you're playing on the receiver. You can't play too close or you're going to get flagged on that every single time. And I've seen this happen to him basically all season long in various games. So hopefully he doesn't get caught up with his hand in the cookie jar. And if that happens, you're going to see this penalty called a lot earlier than not, at least in this matchup. Now, with that being said, I don't know that the Steelers will blow the Giants out, but I don't know that they won't. There's a lot of good things to like between George Pickens, Russell Wilson connection seems to be working flawlessly. And I got to give it up to George Pickens. There was some discrepancy with him in regards to what his conversation was like and the immaturities and things of that nature. And I just talked about Anthony Richardson and how his immaturities are certainly shown this year. Why? Because he's frustrated because he can't get rid of the ball. Now, excuse me. With that being said, I think that when you look at Anthony Richardson, the maturity's not there, hasn't played enough football. And George Pickens, even though he came out of college in his second year, there's a lot to like about George Pickens. There's a lot to like about what he does, But more importantly, look at what he needs to do. And what he needs to do is not worry about those would-be defenders. Just go up, grab the ball. And he did that last week in a tiny toe tap catch with the eyes on the ball at the entire time. And it bounced off his hands one time, but he had presence of mind to hold that ball and pull that ball in. So kudos to George Pickens for growing up fast instead of worrying about, what defenders do, what they won't do, how they'll do it, and the ways that they do it. So, again, a lot to like about the offense. Freiermuth had a very solid, so far has had a solid year. Every time he's targeted, he holds onto the ball. I think there's only one or two that's escaped him this season. Good hands, good hand-eye coordination, a guy who could just grab the ball, hold on to it, hits the ground, and there's your first down yardage right there. I can't say enough about the Steelers defense, and I don't say that because they're number one in defense. They were number one in total defense earlier in the season. That could have came earlier this year, I believe, after week 1 through week 4. They were certainly between 1 and 5, but now they find themselves at 11, which means they're allowing touchdowns. They're allowing different types of plays to develop where they just can't catch up, or they don't do enough of a better job of actually stopping that run. So again, one of those things you have to look out for. Can they stop the run? Can it be consistent? Can TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Keanu Benton, can those guys get in the backfield early and often? And can Patrick Queen really perform at the level he needs to and where he should, especially in this matchup? So I wanted to give my 2 cents on this game. I know it starts in, well, actually not that far from now. But thanks for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. This is an abbreviated version of the RudeDogShow.com. I look forward to getting your opinions, your thoughts, comments, anything you might have. Share them with me. I'll be happy to address them. Steelers fan or not, I'm as objective as they come. So if there was a prediction for this game, and I think I'm going to put this prediction out there in such a way that allows people to kind of sit back and say, okay, all right, that sounds like a good number. I'm going to pick this at 24-17, and here's why. Daniel Jones may find a way to get in the end zone inside of the red zone. If he does that, then that's where your points are going to come from. Maybe a couple of field goals. But then on the other side of that coin, Steelers are just going to run the table in very open downfield passes that essentially will break up any secondary look. And the secondary for the Giants has not played very well either. But again, glimpses of brilliance from the Giants certainly will find a way for the Steelers to maybe capitalize, maybe in a tight end set, maybe in a slant to George Pickens to hit that ball in the middle and gain first down yardage. And they're going to score early and often. If they go up 50-17, I probably won't even watch the fourth quarter. But at the same token, knowing me, I probably will anyway. With that being said, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. Like it, love it, share it. I enjoy that kind of thing. So enjoy the game tonight. It's going to be a good one. And thanks a lot for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. Everybody have a great night. And thanks again for tuning in.